Hi there. Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. I'm David.
It turned into a Pikachu.
Pika pika.
There he is. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. Hope you enjoy it. We're going to start because today is the 13th day of May.
We're going to start by
Reading John chapter 13. All right. So I know people are going to just show up as we're going. I see one person's already here. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is John chapter 13 in the English Standard Version. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from the supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet. Lost my place. And to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash your feet, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted my heel against me. I am telling you this now, before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at the table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it." So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then, after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "What you are going to do, do quickly." Now no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Jesus answered, Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. That's the end of chapter 13. And so there we are in the upper room, and lots of activity going on. And now's the time when we come to the synopsis. It is in a new Pokemon costume. All right. And here is Kimberly to give us the synopsis.
There's an ape named Shift and a donkey named Puzzle, and they're friends. Although Shift basically is horrible and takes advantage of basically everybody around him. And at the main time, it's Puzzle. So, JJ, go back to your room, okay?
Yeah, JJ, go to your room. You've had your time, now it's Timmy's time.
So Puzzle, they find a lion, a dead lion skin in the river. And so they go over and Shift has Puzzle fish it out, and he nearly dies in the attempt.
Was it a river?
It was a lake.
Was it a lake?
It was a waterfall.
It was like a pool
Yeah,
with a
waterfall and everything.
turn and circle.
Yeah,
It was
although
really dangerous for Puzzle to go there, wasn't it?
yeah, although I'm pretty sure it emptied out in a river somewhere.
Maybe,
Probably did. So then after that, let's see, give me a sec. After that, Shift, he made a coat for Puzzle out of the lion skin. And he told Puzzle to go over and get oranges and bananas from the town. And when Shift was done and Puzzle came back, Puzzle said that they were all out of oranges and bananas. And Shift was like, What? That's atrocious. Why would anyone ever be out of oranges and bananas? And so he then puts it on, and then Shift's like, Hey, you look like Aslan, although he didn't. And if someone saw you in low light levels, like in the night, they could mistake you for Aslan, and we could get anything we want. So then he starts cutting down Narnian trees, the Dryads and the Naiads, and then he starts enslaving Narnian horses. And then he says, well, the king, he goes over after getting.
Who's the king?
I forget. Tyrion and his friend unicorn named Jewel. I did look that up earlier, but so Tyrion gets warned by I think it was one of the tree people. I'm not sure if it was a Dryad or a Naiad.
Yeah, there was a tree person.
A centaur. Who told him, hey,
all these
stars
reports that we've heard about Aslan, maybe they're not true.
Yeah, the stars haven't said that Aslan's here, and yep. So just be careful. And then
Yep, Jesus says the stars never lie.
so after that, he goes over and he sees the Narnian horse being enslaved. So he's very rash, and when he hears that it's actually a Narnian horse and not a dumb horse, he kills the person who was whipping the horse, and then they run away. And after talking with the horse and hearing that it was Aslan who told him to work, then they go back and they get taken prisoner and go over to Shift, and Shift then a lamb asks if Shift, he was saying stuff like Tash equals Aslan, and then a lamb was like, what? No, wait, the lamb said that Tash wouldn't be friends with Aslan because he was the god of the Tash, yeah, the Calormenes, and he was like weird, a weird person. Yeah, and they
Like me, I'm weird.
yeah, like imagine
Maybe weirder than me.
yeah, and apparently the people over there they killed stuff on altars for their god and stuff. Yeah. So then um the lamb asked the question and said, "Hey, wouldn't Aslan not be friends with this guy?" And then the ape's like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
"Yep, and these are the same people." Blah 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 blah.
You're just a little lamb. Go back to nursery school.
And then after a little while,
Go back to Mary. Mary had a little lamb.
yep. And so then the king, I keep forgetting the name.
Tyrion.
King Tyrion's like, he said stuff like, that's not true, blah blah blah, and then the people they like knocked him out, and the ape told him to tie him to a tree far away.
And the ape is really, really friendly. We've already discovered this. Oh.
No way.
The ape's not that friendly.
He's
Okay.
like evil.
All right. So we've already discovered that the ape is not really our best friend. We don't really know much about Puzzle other than he's going along with what the ape says, although he is fooled into it, but he is still going along with it. And the ape is Shifty Shift. So yep, enslave the Narnians so everyone can have bananas and cages and what else did they get? Muzzles, yeah. Yeah. I don't think that's really in the Narnian diet. That's, all right. So we're going to start chapter 4, What Happened That Night. The king was so dizzy from being knocked down that he hardly knew what was happening until the Calormenes untied his wrists and put his arms straight down by his sides and set him with his back against an ash tree. Then they bound ropes around his ankles and his knees and his waist and his chest and left him there. What worried him most at the moment, for it is often little things that are the hardest to stand, was that his lip was bleeding where they had hit him, and he couldn't wipe the little trickle of blood away, although it tickled him. From where he was, he could still see the little stable on the top of the hill and the ape sitting in front of it. He could just hear the ape's voice still going on, and every now and then some answer from the crowd, but he could not make out the words. I wonder what they've done to Jewel, thought the king. Presently the crowd of beasts broke up and began going away in different directions. Some passed close to Tyrion. They looked at him as if they were both frightened and sorry to see him tied up, but none of them spoke. Soon they had all gone, and there was silence in the wood. Then hours and hours went past, and Tyrion became first very thirsty and then very hungry. And as the afternoon dragged on and turned into evening, He became cold too. His back was very sore, the sun went down, and it began to be twilight. When it was almost dark, Tyrion heard a light pitter-patter of feet and saw some small creatures coming toward him. The three on the left were mice, and there was a rabbit in the middle. On the right were two moles. Both of these were carrying little bags on their backs, which gave them a little curious look in the dark, so that at first he wondered what kind of beasts they were. Then in a moment they were all standing up on their hind legs, laying their cool paws on his knees and giving his knees snuffly animal kisses. They could reach his knees because Narnian talking beasts of that sort are bigger than the dumb beasts of the same kind in England. "Lord King, dear Lord King," said their shrill voices, "we are so very sorry for you. We daren't untie you because Aslan might be angry with us, but we've brought you supper." At once the first mouse climbed nimbly up till he was perched on the rope that bound Tyrion's chest and was wrinkling his blunt nose in front of Tyrion's face. Then the second mouse climbed up and hung on just below the first mouse. The other beasts stood on the ground and began handing things up. I want to show you the picture before I have to turn the page. There it is. "Drink, sire, and then you'll find you are able to eat," said the topmost mouse, and Tyrion found that a little wooden cup was being held to his lips. It was only the size of an egg cup, so that he had hardly tasted the wine in it before it was empty. But then the mouse passed it down, and the others refilled it, and it was passed up again, and Tyrion emptied it a second time. In this way they went on till he had quite a good drink, which was all the better for coming in little doses, for that is more thirst-quenching than one long draught. "Here is cheese, sire," said the first mouse, "but not very much, for fear it would make you too thirsty." And after the cheese they fed him with oat cakes and fresh butter, and then with some more wine. "Now hand up the water," said the first mouse, "and I'll wash the king's face. There is blood on it." Then Tyrion felt something like a tiny sponge dabbing his face, and it was most refreshing. "Little friend," said Tyrion, "how can I thank you for all this?" You needn't, said the little voices. "What else could we do? We don't want any other king. We're your people. If it was only the ape and the Calormenes who were against you, we would have fought till we were cut into pieces before we'd let them tie you up. We would indeed, but we can't go against Aslan." "Do you think it really is Aslan?" asked the king. "Oh, yes, yes," said the rabbit. "He came out of the stable last night. We all saw him." "What was he like?" said the king. "Like a terrible great lion, to be sure," said one of the mice. "And you think it is really Aslan who is killing the wood nymphs and making you all slaves to the king of Calormen?" "Ah, that's bad, isn't it?" said the second mouse. "It would have been better if we died before all this began. But there's no doubt about it. Everyone says it is Aslan's orders, and we've seen him. We didn't think Aslan would be like that. Why, we wanted him to come back to Narnia." "He seems to have come back very angry this time," said the first mouse. "We must all have done something dreadfully wrong without knowing it. He must be punishing us for something, but I do think we might be told what it was." "I suppose what we're doing now may be wrong," said the rabbit. "I don't care if it is," said one of the moles. "I'll do it again." But the others said, "Oh, hush, and do be careful." And then they all said, "We're sorry, dear king, but we must go back now. It would never do for us to be caught here." "Leave me at once, dear beasts," said Tyrion. I would not for all Narnia bring any of you into danger." Good night, said the beasts, rubbing their noses against his knees. "We will come back, if we can." Then they all pattered away, and the wood seemed darker and colder and lonelier than it had been before they came. The stars came out, and time went slowly on. Imagine how slowly, while the last king of Narnia stood stiff and sore and upright against the tree in his bonds. But at last something happened. Far away there appeared a red light. Then it disappeared for a moment and came back again, bigger and stronger. Then he could see dark shapes going to and fro on this side of the light and carrying bundles and throwing them down. He knew now what he was looking at. It was a bonfire, newly lit, and people were throwing bundles of brushwood onto it. Presently it blazed up, and Tyrion could see that it was on the very top of the hill. He could see quite clearly the stable behind it, all lit up in the glow red, and the great crowd of beasts and men between the fire and himself. A small figure, hunched up beside the fire, must be the ape. It was saying something to the crowd, but he could not hear what. Then it went and bowed 3 times to the ground in front of the door of the stable. Then he got up and opened the door, and something on 4 legs, something that walked rather stiffly, came out of the stable and stood facing the crowd. A great wailing or howling went up, so loud that Tyrion could hear some of the words. "Aslan! Aslan! Aslan!" cried the beasts. "Speak to us! Comfort us! Be angry with us no more!" From where Tyrion was, he could not make out very clearly what the thing was, but he could see that it was yellow and hairy. He had never seen the great lion. He had never seen a common lion. He couldn't be sure that what he saw was not the real Aslan. He had not expected Aslan to look like that stiff thing which stood and said nothing. But how could one be sure? For a moment, horrible thoughts went through his mind. Then he remembered the nonsense about Tush and Aslan being the same, and knew that the whole thing must be a cheat. The ape put his head close up to the yellow thing's head, as if he were listening to something it was whispering to him. Then he turned and spoke to the crowd, and the crowd wailed again. Then the yellow thing turned clumsily around and walked, you might almost say waddled, back into the stable, and the ape shut the door behind it. After that, the fire must have been put out, for the light vanished quite suddenly, and Tyrion was once more alone with the cold and the darkness. He thought of other kings who had lived and died in Narnia in old times, and it seemed to him that none of them had ever been so unlucky as himself. He thought of his great-grandfather's great-grandfather, King Rilian, who had been stolen away by a witch when he was only a young prince, and kept hidden for years in the dark caves beneath the land of the northern giants. But then it had all come right in the end, for 2 mysterious children had suddenly appeared from the land beyond the world's end, and had rescued him, so that he came home to Narnia and had a long and prosperous reign. "It's not like that with me," said Tyrion to himself. Then he went further back and thought about Rilian's father, Caspian the seafarer, whose wicked uncle, King Miraz, had tried to murder him, and how Caspian fled away into the woods and lived among the dwarves. But that story, too, had all come right in the end, for Caspian also had been helped by children. Only there were 4 of them that time, who came from somewhere beyond the world and fought a great battle and set him on his father's throne. But it was all long ago, said Tyrion to himself. That sort of thing doesn't happen anymore. And then he remembered, for he had always been good at history when he was a boy. He remembered how those same 4 children who had helped Caspian had been in Narnia over 1,000 years before, and it was then that they had done the most remarkable thing of all. For then they had defeated the terrible White Witch and ended the 100 years of winter. And after that they had reigned, all 4 of them together, at Cair Paravel, till they were no longer children, but great kings and lovely queens. and their reign had been the golden age of Narnia. And Aslan had come into that story a lot. He had come into all the other stories too, as Tyrion now remembered. Aslan and children from another world, thought Tyrion. They have always come in when things were at their worst. Oh, if only they could come now. And he called out, Aslan, 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 come and help us now. But the darkness and the cold and the quietness went on just the same. Let me be killed, cried the king. I ask nothing for myself, but come and save all Narnia. And still there was no change in the night or the wood, but there began to be a kind of change inside Tyrion. Without knowing why, he began to feel a faint hope, and he felt somehow stronger. Oh, Aslan, Aslan, he whispered, if you will not come yourself, at least send me the helpers from beyond the world, or let me call them. Let my voice carry beyond the world. Hardly knowing what he was doing, or that he was doing it, he suddenly cried out in a great voice, Children, children, friends of Narnia, quick, come to me across the worlds I call you. I, Tyrion, king of Narnia, lord of Air-Paravel, and emperor of the Lone Islands. And immediately he was plunged into a dream, more vivid than any he had had in his life. He seemed to be standing in a lighted room where 7 people sat round a table. It looked as if they had just finished their meal. 2 of those people were very old, an old man with a white beard and an old woman with wise, merry, twinkling eyes. He who sat at the right hand of the old man was hardly full grown, certainly younger than Tyrion himself, but his face had already the look of a king and a warrior. And you could almost say the same of the other youth who sat at the right hand of the old woman. Facing Tyrion across the table sat a fair-haired girl, younger than either of these, and on either side of her a boy and a girl who were younger still. They were all dressed in what seemed to Tyrion the oddest kind of clothes. But he had no time to think about details like that, for instantly the youngest boy and both the girls started to their feet, and one of them gave a little scream. The old woman started and drew in her breath sharply. The old man must have made some sudden movement too, for the wine-glass which stood at his right hand was swept off the table. Tyrion could hear the tinkling noise as it broke on the floor. Then Tyrion realized that these people could see him. They were staring at him as if they saw a ghost, but he noticed that the king-like one who sat at the old man's right never moved, though he turned pale, except that he clenched his hand very tightly. Then he said, Speak, if you're not a phantom or a dream. You have a Narnian look about you, and we are the 7 friends of Narnia. Tyrion was longing to speak, and he tried to cry out aloud that he was Tyrion of Narnia, in great need of help, but he found, and as I have sometimes found in dreams also, that his voice made no noise at all. The one who had already spoken to him rose to his feet. Shadow or spirit, or whatever you are, he said, fixing his eyes full upon Tyrion. If you are from Narnia, I charge you, in the name of Aslan, speak to me. I am Peter, the High King. The room began to swim before Tyrion's eyes. He heard the voices of those 7 people all speaking at once, and all getting fainter every second, and they were saying things like, Look, it's fading, it's melting away, it's vanishing. Next moment he was wide awake, still tied to the tree, colder and stiffer than ever. The wood was full of the pale, dreary light that comes before sunrise, and he was soaking wet with dew. It was nearly morning. That waking was about the worst moment he had ever had in his life. Chapter 5: How Help Came to the King. But his misery did not last long. Almost at once there came a bump, and then a second bump, and two children were standing before him. The wood in front of him had been quite empty a second before, and he knew they had not come from behind his tree, for he would have heard them. They had, in fact, simply appeared from nowhere. He saw at a glance that they were wearing the same queer, dingy sort of clothes as the people in his dream, and he saw at a second glance that they were the youngest boy and girl out of that party of 7. Gosh, said the boy, that took one's breath away. I thought, hurry up and get me untied. Get him untied, said the girl. We can talk afterward. Then she added, turning to Tyrion, I'm sorry we've been so long. We came the moment we could. While she was speaking, the boy produced a knife from his pocket and was quickly cutting the king's bonds. Too quickly, in fact, for the king was so stiff and numb that when the last cord was cut, he fell forward on his hands and knees. He couldn't get up again till he had brought some life back into his legs by a good rubbing. I say, said the girl, it was you, wasn't it, who appeared to us last night? That night when we were all at supper, nearly a week ago? A week, fair maid? Said Tyrion. My dream led me into your world scarce 10 minutes since. It's the usual muddle about times, Pole, said the boy. I remember now, said Tyrion. That too comes in all the old tales. The time of your strange land is different from ours. But if we speak of time, 'tis time to be gone from here, for my enemies are close at hand. Will you come with me? Of course, said the girl. It's you we've come to help. Tyrion got to his feet and led them rapidly down the hill, southward and away from the stable. He knew where he meant to go, but his first aim was to get to rocky places where they would leave no trail, and his second to cross some water so that they would leave no scent. This took them about an hour's scrambling and waiting, and while that was going on, nobody had any breath to talk. But even so, Tyrion kept on stealing glances at his companions. The wonder of walking beside the creatures from another world made him feel a little dizzy, but it also made all the old stories seem far more real than they had ever seemed before. Anything might happen now. I'll show you this picture. Here they are crossing the river. Now, said Tyrion, as they came to the head of the little valley which ran down before them among young birch trees, we are out of danger of those villains for a space, and may walk more easily. The sun had risen, dewdrops were twinkling on every branch, and birds were singing. What about some grub? I mean, for you, sir. We too have had our breakfast, said the boy. Tyrion wondered very much what he meant by grub, but when the boy opened a bulgy satchel which he was carrying and pulled out a rather greasy and squashy packet, he understood. He was ravenously hungry, though he hadn't thought about it till that moment. There were 2 hard-boiled egg sandwiches and 2 cheese sandwiches, and 2 with some kind of paste in them. If he hadn't been so hungry, he wouldn't have thought much of the paste, for that is a sort of food nobody eats in Narnia. By the time he had eaten all 6 sandwiches, they had come to the bottom of the valley, and there they found a mossy cliff with a little fountain bubbling out of it. All 3 stopped and drank and splashed their hot faces. And now, said the girl as she tossed her wet hair back from her forehead, aren't you going to tell us who you are, and why you were tied up, and what it's all about? With a good will, damsel, said Tyrion, but we must keep on the march. So, while they went on walking, he told them who he was and all the things that had happened to him. And now, he said at the end, I am going to a certain tower, one of 3 that were built in my grandsire's time, to guard Lantern Waste against certain perilous outlaws who dwelled there in his day. By Aslan's good will, I was not robbed of my keys. In that tower we shall find stores of weapons and mail, and some victuals also, though no better than dry biscuit. There also we can lie safe while we make our plans. And now, prithee, Tell me who you two are and all your story. I'm Eustace Scrubb, and this is Jill Pole, said the boy, and we were here once before, ages and ages ago, more than a year by our time, and there was a chap called Prince Relian, and they were keeping this chap underground, and Puddleglum put his foot in. Ha! Cried Tyrion. Are you then that Eustace and that Jill who rescued King Relian from his long enchantment? Yes, that's us, said Jill. So he's King Relian now, is he? Oh, of course he would be. I forgot. Nay, said Tyrion. I am the seventh in descent from him. He has been dead over 200 years. Jill made a face. Ugh, she said. That's the horrid part about coming back to Narnia. But Eustace went on. Well, now you know who we are, sire, he said, and it was like this. The professor and Aunt Polly had got all us friends of Narnia together. I know not these names, Eustace, said Tyrion. They're the two who came into Narnia at the very beginning, the day all the animals learned to talk. By the lion's mane, cried Tyrion. Those two, the Lord Diggory and the Lady Polly, from the dawn of the world, and still alive in your place, the wonder and the glory of it. But tell me. She isn't really our aunt, you know, said Eustace. She's Miss Plummer, but we call her Aunt Polly. Well, those two got us all together, partly just for fun, so that we could all have a good jaw about Narnia. For, of course, there's no one else we can ever talk to about things like that, but partly because the professor had been feeling that we were somehow wanted over here. Well, then you came like a ghost or goodness knows what, and nearly frightened the lives out of us and vanished without saying a word. After that, we knew for certain there was something up. The next question was how to get here. You can't just go by wanting to. So we talked, and at last the professor said the only way would be by the magic rings. It was by those rings that he and Aunt Polly had got here long, long ago, when they were only kids, years before we were younger, we younger ones were born. But the rings had all been buried in the garden of a house in London. That's our big town, sire. And the house had been sold. So then the problem was how to get at them. You'll never guess what we did in the end. Peter and Edmund, that's the High King Peter, the one who spoke to you, went up to London to get into the garden from the back, early in the morning before people were up. Then they were dressed like workmen, so that if anyone did see them, it would look as if they'd come to do something about the drains. I wish I'd been with them. It must have been a glorious fun, and they must have succeeded, for next day Peter sent us a wire. That's a sort of message. Sire, I'll explain all about it some other time, to say he'd got the rings. And the day after that was the day Pole and I had to go back to school. We're the only two who were still at school, and we're at the same one. So Peter and Edmund were to meet us at a place on the way down to school and hand over the rings. It had to be us two who were to go to Narnia, you see, because the older ones couldn't come again. So we got into the train. That's a kind of thing people travel in our world. A lot of wagons chained together, and the professor and Aunt Polly and Lucy came with us. We wanted to keep together as long as we could. Well, there we were in the train, and we were just getting to the station where the others were to meet us, and I was looking out of the window to see if I could see them, when suddenly there came a most frightful jerk and a noise, and there we were in Narnia, and there was your Majesty tied up to the tree. So you never used the rings, said Tyrion. No, said Eustace, never even saw them. Aslan did it all for us in his own way without any rings. But the High King Peter has them, said Tyrion. Yes, said Jill, but we don't think he can use them. When the two other Pevensies, King Edmund and Queen Lucy, were last here, Aslan said they would never come to Narnia again, and he said something of the same sort to the High King only longer ago. You may be sure he'll come like a shot if he's allowed. Gosh, said Eustace, it's getting hot in the sun. Are we nearly there, sire? Look, said Tyrion, and pointed. Not many yards away, grey battlements rose above the treetops, and after a minute's more walking, they came out in an open, grassy space. A stream ran across it, and on the far side of the stream stood a squat, square tower with very few and narrow windows, and one heavy-looking door in the wall and faced them. I'm going to show you the picture. All right. Tyrion looked sharply this way and that to make sure that no enemies were in sight. Then he walked up to the tower and stood still for a moment, fishing up his bunch of keys, which he wore inside his hunting dress on a narrow silver chain that went round his neck. It was a nice bunch of keys that he brought out, for 2 were golden and many were richly ornamented. You could see at once that they were keys made for opening solemn and secret rooms in palaces or chests or caskets of sweet-smelling wood that contained royal treasures. But the key which he now put into the lock of the door was big and plain and more rudely made. The lock was stiff, and for a moment Tyrion began to be afraid that he would not be able to turn it. But at last he did, and the door swung open with a sullen creak. "Welcome, friends," said Tyrion. "I fear this is the best palace that the King of Narnia can now offer to his guests." Tyrion was pleased to see that the 2 strangers had been well brought up. They both said not to mention it, and that they were sure it would be very nice. As a matter of fact, it was not particularly nice. It was rather dark and smelled rather damp. There was only one room in it, and this room went right up to the stone roof. A wooden staircase in one corner led up to a trap door by which you could get out on the battlements. There were a few rude bunks to sleep in, and a great many lockers and bundles. There was also a hearth which looked as if nobody had lit a fire in it for a great many years. "We'd better go out and gather some firewood first thing, hadn't we?" said Jill. "Not yet, comrade," said Tyrion. He was determined that they should not be caught unarmed, and began searching the lockers, thankfully remembering that he had always been careful to have these garrison towers inspected once a year to make sure they were stocked with all things needful. The bowstrings were there in their coverings of oiled silk. The swords and spears were greased against rust, and the armor was kept bright in its wrappings. But there was something even better. "Look," said Tyrion, as he drew out a long mail shirt of a curious pattern and flashed it before the children's eyes. "That's funny-looking mail, sire," said Eustace. "Aye, lad," said Tyrion. "No Narnian dwarf smithied that. 'Tis mail of Calormen, outlandish gear. I have ever kept a few suits of it in readiness, for I never knew when I or my friends might have reason to walk unseen in the Tisrock's land. And look on this stone bottle. In this there is a juice, which when we have rubbed it on our hands and faces will make us brown as Calormenes." "Oh, hurrah!" said Jill. "Disguise! I love disguises." I'm going to show you the picture. Jill loves disguises. Tyrion showed them how to pour out a little of the juice into the palms of their hands, and then rub it well over their faces and necks, right down to the shoulders, and then on their hands right up to the elbows. He did the same for himself. "After this has hardened on us," he said, "we may wash in water, and it will not change. Nothing but oil and ashes will make us white Narnians again. And now, sweet Jill, let us go see how this mail shirt becomes you. 'Tis something too long, yet not so much as I feared. Doubtless it belongs to a page in the train of one of their Tarkans." After the mail shirts they put on Calormene helmets, which are little round ones, fitting tight to the head and having a spike on top. Then Tyrion took long rolls of some white stuff out of the locker and wound them over the helmets till they became turbans, but the little steel spike still stuck up in the middle. He and Eustace took curved Calormene swords and little round shields. There was no sword light enough for Jill, but he gave her a long, straight hunting knife, which made do for a sword at a pinch. "Hast any skill with the bow, maiden?" said Tirion. "Nothing worth talking of," said Jill, blushing. "Scrub's not bad." "Do you believe her, sire?" said Eustace. "We've both been practicing archery ever since we got back from Narnia last time, and she's about as good as me now. Not that either of us is much." Then Tirion gave Jill a bow and a quiver full of arrows. The next business was to light a fire, for inside that tower it still felt more like a cave than like anything indoors, and set one shivering. But they got warm gathering the wood. The sun was now at its highest, and when once the blaze was roaring up the chimney, the place began to look cheerful. Dinner was, however, a dull meal, for the best they could do was to pound up some of the hard biscuit which they found in a locker, and pour it into boiling water with salt so as to make a kind of porridge. And of course there was nothing to drink but water. "I wish we'd brought a packet of tea," said Jill. "Or a tin of cocoa," said Eustace. "A firkin or so of good wine in each of these towers would not have been amiss," said Tirion. The next chapter is chapter 6, A Good Night's Work. These chapters are just going by. This one is another 10-pager, so I think we can do it. What do you say? JJ? Asleep, more than likely. Completely out. That's okay. He'll get the synopsis. And I'm almost certain to read this series at least one more time before he graduates. So probably like in 3 years or so. Oh, I've got some notifications. Just a minute. All right. Do you want me to read, or do you want me to? Is it going to be distracting? Okay. All right. Chapter 6, A Good Night's Work. About 4 hours later, Tirion flung himself into one of the bunks to snatch a little sleep. The 2 children were already snoring. He had made them go to bed before he did, because they would have to be up most of the night, and he knew that at their age they couldn't do without sleep. Also, he had tired. First, he had given Jill some practice in archery, and found that, though not up to Narnian standards, she was really not too bad. Indeed, she had succeeded in shooting a rabbit. Not a talking rabbit, of course. There are lots of the ordinary kind about in the Western Narnia. And it was already skinned, cleaned, and hanging up. He had found that both the children knew all about this chilly and smelly job, and they had learned that kind of thing on their great journey through Giant Land in the days of Prince Rilian. Then he had tried to teach Eustace how to use his sword and shield. Eustace had learned quite a lot about sword fighting on his earlier adventures, but that had been all with a straight Narnian sword. He had never handled a curved Calormene scimitar, and that made it hard, for many of the strokes are quite different, and some of the habits he had learned with the long sword had now to be unlearned again. But Tirion found that he had a good eye and was very quick on his feet. He was surprised at the strength of both children. In fact, they both seemed to be already much stronger and bigger and more grown up than they had been when he first met them a few hours ago. It was one of the effects which Narnian air often has on visitors from our world. All 3 of them agreed that the very first thing they must do was to go back to Stable Hill and try to rescue Jewel, the unicorn. After that, if they succeeded, they would try to get away eastward and meet the little army which Runewit, the centaur, would be bringing from Cair Paravel. An experienced warrior and huntsman like Tirion can always wake up at the time he wants. So he gave himself till 9 o'clock that night, and then put all worries out of his head and fell asleep at once. It seemed only a moment later when he woke, but he knew by the light and the very feel of things that he had timed his sleep exactly. He got up, put on his helmet and turban, he had slept in his mail shirt, and then shook the other two till they woke up. They looked, to tell the truth, very grey and dismal as they climbed out of their bunks, and there was a good deal of yawning. "Now," said Tirion, "we go due north from here. By good fortune, 'tis a starry night, and it will be much shorter than our journey this morning. For then we went round about, but now we shall go straight. If we are challenged, then do you two hold your peace, and I will do my best to talk like a cursed, cruel, proud lord of Calormen. If I draw my sword, then thou, Eustace, must do likewise, and let Jill leap behind us and stand with an arrow on the string. But if I cry, home, then fly for the tower, both of you, and let none try to fight on, not even one stroke after I have given the retreat. Such false valor has spoiled many notable plans in the wars. And now, friends, in the name of Aslan, let us go forward." Out they went into the cold night. All the great northern stars were burning above the treetops. The North Star of that world is called the Spearhead. It is brighter than our pole star. For a time they could go straight toward the spearhead, but presently they came to a dense thicket so that they had to go out of their course to get round it. And after that, for they were still overshadowed by branches, it was hard to pick up their bearings. It was Jill who set them right again. She had been an excellent guide in England, and of course she knew her Narnian stars perfectly, having travelled so much in the wild northern lands, and could work out the direction from other stars even when the spearhead was hidden. As soon as Tirion saw that she was the best pathfinder of the three of them, he put her in front, and then he was astonished to find how silently and almost invisibly she glided on before them. "By the mane," he whispered to Eustace, "this girl is a wondrous wood maid. If she had Dryad's blood in her, she could scarce do it better." "She's so small, that's what helps," whispered Eustace. But Jill from in front said, "Shh, less noise." All round them the wood was very quiet. Indeed, it was far too quiet. On an ordinary Narnian night there ought to have been noises, an occasional cheery good night from a hedgehog, the cry of an owl overhead, perhaps a flute in the distance to tell of the fauns dancing, or some throbbing, hammering noises from the dwarves underground. All that was silenced. Gloom and fear reigned over Narnia. After a time they began to go steeply uphill, and the trees grew further apart. Tirion could dimly make out the well-known hilltop and the stable. Jill was now going with more and more caution. She kept on making signs to the others with her hand to do the same. Then she stopped dead still, and Tirion saw her gradually sink down into the grass and disappear without a sound. A moment later she rose again, put her mouth close to Tyrion's ear, and said in the lowest possible whisper, "Get down, thee better." She said "thee" for "see," not because she had a lisp, but because she knew that the hissing letter S is the part of a whisper most likely to be overheard. Tirion at once lay down almost as silently as Jill, but not quite, for he was heavier and older, and once they were down, he saw how from that position you could see the edge of the hill sharp against the star-strewn sky. Two black shapes rose against it. One was the stable, and the other, a few feet in front of it, was the Calormene sentry. He was keeping very ill watch, not walking or even standing, but sitting, with his spear over his shoulder and his chin on his chest. "Well done," said Tirion to Jill. She had shown him exactly what he needed to know. Here's a picture of the three of them approaching the stable, and you can barely see that Calormene sentry that's sitting outside of the tent. Da-da-da. They got up, and Tyrion now took the lead. Very slowly, hardly daring to breathe, they made their way to a little clump of trees which was not more than 40 feet away from the sentinel. "Wait here till I come again," he whispered to the other two. "If I miscarry, fly." Then he sauntered out boldly in full view of the enemy. The man started when he saw him and was just going to jump to his feet. He was afraid Tyrion might be one of his own officers and that he would get into trouble for sitting down. But before he could get up, Tyrion had dropped on one knee beside him, saying, "Art thou a warrior of the Tisrocs? May he live forever. It cheers my heart to meet thee among all these beasts and devils of Narnians. Give me thy hand, friend." Before he well knew what was happening, the Calormene sentry found his right hand seized in a mighty grip. Next instant, someone was kneeling on his legs, and a dagger was pressed against his neck. "One noise and thou art dead," said Tyrion in his ear. "Tell me where the unicorn is, and thou shalt live." Behind the stable, O my master," stammered the unfortunate man. "Good. Rise up and lead me to him." As the man got up, the point of the dagger never left his neck. It only traveled round, cold and rather ticklish, as Tyrion got behind him and settled it at a convenient place under his ear. Trembling, he went round to the back of the stable. Though it was dark, Tyrion could see the white shape of Jewel at once. "Hush," he said. "No, do not neigh. Yes, Jewel, it is I. How have they tied thee?" "Hobbled by all 4 legs, and tied with a bridle to a ring in the stable wall," came Jewel's voice. "Stand here, sentry, with your back to the wall. So, now, Jewel, set the point of your horn against this Calormene's breast." "With a good will, sire," said Jewel. "If he moves, rive him to the heart." Then, in a few seconds, Tyrion cut the ropes. With the remains of them he bound the sentry hand and foot. Finally, he made him open his mouth, stuffed it full of grass, and tied him up from scalp to chin so that he could make no noise. Lowered the man into a sitting position and set him against the wall. "I have done thee some discourtesy, soldier," said Tyrion, "but such was my need. If we meet again, I may happen to do thee a better turn. Now, Jewel, let us go softly." He put his left arm around the beast's neck and bent and kissed his nose, and both had great joy. They went back as quietly as possible to the place where he had left the children. It was darker in there under the trees, and he nearly ran into Eustace before he saw him. "All's well," whispered Tyrion. "A good night's work. Now for home." They turned and had gone a few paces when Eustace said, "Where are you, Pole?" There was no answer. "Is Jill on the other side of you, sire?" he asked. "What?" said Tyrion. "Is she not on the other side of you?" It was a terrible moment. They dared not shout, but they whispered her name in the loudest whispers they could manage. There was no reply. "Did she go from you while I was away?" asked Tyrion. "I didn't see or hear her go," said Eustace, "but she could have gone without my knowing. She can be as quiet as a cat. You've seen for yourself." At that moment a far-off drumbeat was heard. Jewel moved his ears forward. "Dwarves," he said. "And treacherous dwarves, enemies, as likely as not," muttered Tyrion. "And here comes something on hoofs, much nearer," said Jewel. The 2 humans and the unicorn stood dead still. There were now so many different things to worry about that they didn't know what to do. The noise of hoofs came steadily nearer, and then, quite close to them, a voice whispered, "Hello, are you all there?" Thank heaven it was Jill's. "Where the devil have you been up to?" said Eustace in a furious whisper, for he had been very frightened. "In the stable," gasped Jill, but it was the sort of gasp you give when you're struggling with suppressed laughter. "Oh," growled Eustace. "You think it funny, do you? Well, all I can say is, have you got Jewel, sire?" asked Jill. "Yes, here he is." "What is that beast with you?" "That's him," said Jill. "But let's be off home before anyone wakes up." And again there came little explosions of laughter. The others obeyed at once, for they had already lingered long enough in that dangerous place, and the dwarf drums seemed to have come a little nearer. It was only after they had been walking southward for several minutes that Eustace said, "Got him? What do you mean?" "The false Aslan," said Jill. "What?" said Tyrion. "Where have you been? What have you done?" "Well, sire," said Jill, "as soon as I saw that you'd got the sentry out of the way, I thought hadn't I better have a look inside the stable and see what really is there. So I crawled along. It was as easy as anything to draw the bolt. Of course it was pitch black inside and smelled like any other stable. Then I struck a light and, would you believe it, there was nothing at all there but this old donkey with a bundle of lion skin tied onto his back. So I drew my knife and told him he'd have to come along with me. As a matter of fact, I needn't have threatened him with the knife at all. He was very fed up with this stable and quite ready to come, weren't you, Puzzle dear?" "Great Scott!" said Eustace. "Well, I'm jiggered. I was jolly angry with you a moment ago, and I still think it was mean of you to sneak off without the rest of us, but I must admit it. Well, I mean to say, well, it was a perfectly gorgeous thing to do. If she was a boy, she'd have been knighted, wouldn't she, sire?" "If she was a boy," said Tyrion, "she'd be whipped for disobeying orders." And in the dark no one could see whether he said this with a frown or a smile. Next minute there was a sound of rasping metal. "What are you doing, sire?" asked Jewel sharply. "Drawing my Drawing my sword. No, because the next word is smite. And so I said smite and sword at the same time. You guys do realize that whenever I'm reading, I'm actually like about a line ahead of at least a few words. My brain is at least a few words of what I'm saying, ahead of what I'm saying. So sometimes the words come out together. "Drawing my sword to smite off the head of the accursed donkey," said Tyrion in a terrible voice. "Stand clear, girl." "Oh, don't. Please don't," said Jill. "Really, you mustn't. It wasn't his fault. It was all the ape. He didn't know any better, and he's very sorry. He's a nice donkey. His name's Puzzle, and I've got my arms around his neck." "Jill," said Tyrion, "you are the bravest and most woodwise of all my subjects, but also the most malapert and disobedient. Well, let the donkey live. What have you to say for yourself, donkey?" "Me, sire?" came the donkey's voice. "I'm sure I'm very sorry if I've done wrong. The ape said Aslan wanted me to dress up like that, and I thought he'd know. I'm not clever like him. I only did what I was told. It wasn't any fun for me living in that stable. I don't even know what's been going on outside. He never let me out except for a minute or two at night. Some days they forgot to give me any water, too." "Sire," said Jewel, "those dwarfs are coming nearer and nearer. Do we want to meet them?" Tyrion thought for a moment and then suddenly gave a great laugh out loud. Then he spoke, not this time in a whisper. "By the lion," he said, "I am growing slow-witted. Meet them? Certainly we will meet them. We will meet anyone now. We have this donkey to show them. Let them see the thing they have feared and bowed to. We can show them the truth of the ape's vile plot. His secret is out. The tide has turned. Tomorrow we shall hang that ape on the highest tree in Narnia. No more whispering and skulking in disguises. Where are these honest dwarves? We have good news for them." When you have been whispering for hours, the mere sound of anyone talking out loud has a wonderfully stirring effect. The whole party began talking and laughing. Even Puzzle lifted up his head and gave a grand haw hee haw hee haw, a thing the ape hadn't allowed him to do for days. Then they set off in the direction of the drumming. It grew steadily louder, and soon they could see torchlight as well. They came out on one of those rough roads, we should hardly call them roads at all in England, which ran through Lantern Waste, and there, marching sturdily along, were about 30 dwarfs, all with their little spades and mattocks over their shoulders. 2 armed Calormenes led the column, and 2 more brought up the rear. I'm going to show you the picture. It's a kind of a silhouette-y kind of picture. So that's a great picture for any fantasy adventure, I think. So yeah, silhouette of them kind of on the ridge. You can see the back, not the background, but the shadow of them. It's kind of cool. Stay, thundered Tyrion as he stepped out on the road. Stay, soldiers! Whither do you lead these Narnian dwarves, and by whose orders? That is the end of chapter 7, which is called, or the end of chapter 6. Tomorrow we will read chapter 7, which is called Mainly About Dwarves, and the first word is the. So I hope y'all are enjoying the story. If we keep doing 3 chapters a day, we'll finish it a lot faster than 8 days, but it's fine. This is pretty good adventure, right? Okay, so JJ's asleep. Daniel is laying on the floor, needs to get in bed. You should take off those pants and put on something lighter than that. Okay. Well, he's got pajamas on, but they're kind of warm. So I hope you have a good night, and God bless you, and we will see you tomorrow when I tell another couple chapters of the story. All right, love you, Becca.